just mentioned the 3K project, which is largely funded through the Gates Foundation in China, the Ministry of Science and Technology of China, plus the Shenzhen municipal government that support this project. You know, we certainly have a very important goal when we convince the donor and also the government to fund this large project. You know, rice is the most important crop in China. We have probably the largest public resources in China in terms of the funding, in terms of the capacity. We have more than 3,000 rice breeders. We have probably another 5,000 people working on rice genomics and genetics and all aspects of the rice science in China. And we also have very strong support from the government because rice is so important. So the primary purpose of this to do this project is we want to create a permanent database that is really user-friendly for the rice breeders as well, and also we want to set up a model that can be adopted by the other major crop species. Because now we form a new institute with the BGI from CAS and BGI. We call CAS-CIBI, the Institute for Breeding and Innovation. That is going to establish such a database that is for the breeder use. One example, we have parallel efforts for both rice functional genomics, for rice molecular breeding. For example, we have at least more than probably about $10 million funding from the Chinese government for rice functional genomics consortium, led by Dr. Qifa Zhang, and more than probably 50 labs across the country working on rice functional genomics. In parallel, we have a very large molecular breeding network for integration of the diversity from the germplasm. You can imagine that among the 3,000 elite or sequence of the germplasm, we have 800 lines included that has been utilized as a parent lines. So all the information generated from breeding will have a different breeding strategy. That information and the gene discovered allele will be completely linked to the DNA sequence, the function, the phenotype. At the same time, we are also considered to form very large phenotyping consortium in China to not only phenotype the germplasm, because we think we have very low power in detecting to link the phenotype with the allelic diversity using the population genetics tool. But we have generated huge number of projects from breeding and from mapping population that allow us to really can linking and generate tremendous information of the phenotype and the function of the genes and allelic diversity in this panel to be utilized by the breeders. And very importantly, through the Green Supervised project, all the material and also the information will be made public available to all the scientific community through this activity. So that it means that the public source of funding in China will be contributed tremendously to the world rice science. So this is also very important. And you can imagine that merging with the CAS and also BGI have a tremendous capacity in DNA sequencing and bioinformatics, plus our tremendous capacity in rice genetics, genomics, and breeding. I think we have probably the best position to take this to be a major part of this effort. We agree that we'll be part of this consortium. With the IRIC, we have already long-term good relationship with the collaboration with the IRIC and other partners across the world. But of course, when we convince the Chinese government to fund the activity, we will also make sure that those outputs will benefit the Chinese industry, rice industry as well. Another interest is for our new institute is at the same time we want to set this as an example, and we want to expand and learn the strategy from this activity to cover other major crops such as maize and wheat and other major crops in the near future. Okay, this is what I'm going to say. If I have missing anything, then Genyu and Xu Xin can say something.
Yeah. I mean, please introduce yourself, because I'm not sure you guys know each other, or I don't know. Just
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Genyu Zhang. I'm a Deputy Director in BGI, focused on agriculture department. And something I just want to say is basically the basic target of BGI's agriculture department is try to establish a technical supporting platform for all the researchers and even the breeders. As the BGI is currently the most active genomic institute focused on agriculture-related species, and we perhaps we are the top one institute finished most of the agriculture-related species reference genome so far. And basically, we know definitely this is just the first step to finish the reference genome, and the second maybe the fine genotyping of based on the resequencing of a lot of core germ types. But also go further, we need to establish a platform which could be really usable or friendly usable by the breeders or by the scientists which are focused on specific their target species. So it's the part of the target of the BGI to build up a platform like that, and that's also the base of the BGI to collaborate with Gates Foundation, as that has been strongly supported by Gates Foundation for this vision. So it's BGI finished the 3,000 lines of core genome sequencing very fast. Basically, based on our capacity, it has been finished just within 2 months. And currently, we started on the basic analysis of those data. But this was just the beginning. Go further, we also will give the support and give to build up a real good database for all the users in the world. And as I see, based on the BGI's vision, based on also the Gates Foundation's idea, that's also just a beginning step. Perhaps this is just a first example for main crops, and then go further step by step. We want to build up a database of all the species, all the main crops, and provided the service to the scientists and even to the breeders. So based on this vision, based on this our targets, we also develop some cloud computing softwares, and some of them has been open for the testing. And in future, I think that could be a user-friendly platform, not for scientists but also for breeders. And currently, our database for this service is in Hong Kong. So it was one of the most excellent data harbor in the world. So the facilities, that's no problem. And go further, basically, based on we have got very strong local government support. So another supercomputer will be built out in Guangzhou. That's just about 150 kilometers from Shenzhen. And that one, at that time, it has been established. The target is the top one supercomputer in the world. And the most important purpose of that computer is support the bioinformatics required. Basically, the largest user is BGI. So as I see, we have a very good infrastructure to support this the whole purpose Kim described. And we also want to build up that database as an open database to all the users, and also at the same time, we wanted to be a database which could easily exchange information and easily for the users to feed back the information and also accumulate the information and let it to be an actively usable database for all the scientists and even for breeders. Yeah, that's BGI's vision and BGI's target for this project.
Thanks.
Do you have something to say? Sure.
Go, back there.
Yeah, hi, Dick McCombie, Colchester Harbor. So, a couple of things. Looking at this problem, I've been involved in genome projects, human rights, diagnosis, mouse, a number of them, and in all of them, the informatics, well, for that matter, even the sequencing, developed over time as people figured out the best way to deal with that project. And in all of those cases, I think to some degree, there were a number of different approaches tried at different places that coalesced into sort of best practices at some point in time. And I think we should be careful here of not planning out something that's really not known. People haven't done databases quite like this before, and I think it's important to really consider seriously more of a confederation model with a core of shared data that everyone has access to and can develop then applications and tools on top of it. And then as people learn how to use this and develop interesting new things to do, which will better come from more places than one place, I think that will improve the overall community access in the future. And lastly, I think IRI needs to consider sort of who's going to have accountability. The other problem with one place, and I'm going to make some enemies in the U.S. by saying this, the U.S. spent a lot of money on plant cyber infrastructure at one site. And I'm one of a large number of people in the community that think that's been very poorly spent money. And it is not delivered nearly what it should have to the U.S. plant scientific community. And I think that's a real problem with sort of throwing a lot of money at one site and hoping for the best. Even with very rigorous peer review and that went into that process, I think it's been a disappointment for the community. And I think that's an object lesson that you need to look at. The other one you need to look at is if IRI ultimately should have control over this, which I think is probably the case, I think you have to work out some way that you control the money, because if it's done by a U.S. company or any other organization, if you're not controlling the money, if there are competing interests, which there may not be, IRI will lose. And I think that's not in IRI's best long-term interest, nor in the community's best long-term interest.
Yeah, thanks. These are very good comments. And that, I think the confederation model would, at least from what I understand, would be an integral part of that. I mean, you would have a core set of things that actually have to be used by various groups to explore these different routes. So that, I think, to me, is absolutely essential. And it's the same for the genomics data as well as for the phenotyping information. Lots of things need to be tried there. We have absolutely, I think most of us cannot even quite imagine the complexities involved that are going to come. So yes, I think that's a very good suggestion. And I also say, in the end, I think we view ourselves as a facilitating institution, but that also means that in the end you have to have some accountability that is right. You need to make it work. I think, that's probably a good lesson. Susan, please.
Susan McCooch, Cornell University. I think maybe what I'd like to say is that it's a kind of oasis model. So the oasis model is that you have a pool. In this case, it would be information of genotype, phenotype connected to seed stocks, a pool of information to which everyone is drawn. They need it. They will all come because they want something there, and actually they need it to sustain a kind of community that exists around an oasis. What you want to do is draw diverse people to that pool. Now I'm imagining that pool is IRI, because your role in the community is to get a lot of different people interacting, because from that interaction is going to come new ideas, a lot of innovation, and a lot of things might be tested. Many of them may fail, which is fine. I think the rice community is looking to IRI to kind of help us create an environment in which we can all actively participate participate and enjoy, if you will, our interactions and our intellectual exchanges and train our students and get another generation going, because we have big challenges that we face now. And we can keep that pool of water only if we're very careful about it. We have to really think about the sustainability of that oasis. Because we could drink it dry, right? We could take too much away and not bring enough to the table. So what I keep coming back to that metaphor, because I think that we're lucky in the Rice community that we have an international institution. It exists, it has history. We all kind of maybe have different ideas about what it might be or do or become, but it's a process of iterative exchange. And we have drivers that change over time historically. Right now, China is a huge driver, an enormous driver. 20 years ago, China was not really in the same position, and 20 years from now, China may not be in the same position. We're grateful for whatever comes, and we should make use of it, but as you said, things evolve over time. So my plea is that we see this as the data we're collecting as a long-term resource. What we're asking IRI collectively, we're all here to become part of, if you will, help IRI manage this, but to keep it as a long-term investment that is a collective public good. And the definition of how and where the periphery of that public good is not clear to me. But I'm not that clear on how the public and the private sectors are going to interact here, but I think that is one of our great opportunities and potentials for making maybe some mistakes, but we have to try. And so I'd just like to say that the data resource that we're trying to create, with or without access, as you say, many layers of it, I'd like to make sure that we see it as ensuring a long-term public good that we can all draw on for the future of food security and work together to make sure that that happens, where IRI is our collective opportunity or institution that allows us to work together to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, good, very good suggestions. So I think it's pretty much also our view. We don't have all the answers yet. I think also when it comes to how the interaction with the private sector should actually be, what are the different expectations. But if we don't really try, we'll never get the answers either. So, but I think the overarching goal really has to be that this is, as you say, a long-term investment into a public good. And what then the various stakeholders do with that investment in terms of the information and the resources is up to them. But you've got to have it there. Okay, more opportunities.
My name is Rob Lang from the University of Arizona. I was listening to what Dick was saying. I think Blake Myers might be listening in, so he would be a good person to speak to that. But he's been running this the Arabidopsis Information Portal, and that's a confederated situation where various modules are being developed and they all plug into a central database. And I think that's a really pretty good model, and I think it really doesn't matter where the computation is happening. I mean, that'll be at a supercomputer. It would be in Texas, it would be in China, but to have then you have this central place where everybody can go. So it doesn't, the location of that is not critical, but like I think what Susan was saying is that she thinks that having the leadership through IRI would be important, and I agree with that because that's an international center, and we can all interact. And I think definitely it's very timely that we have a lot of coordination for rice because we have this 9 billion people question to solve, and we don't have a lot of time to solve that question. So definitely this is a very important step in that direction to establish something like this. And I think what Shikan Li mentioned about all the stuff that's going on in China, to me, one of the most important things that we need to do is be able to distribute seed freely around the world. And that's become a big issue. And we really only have, again, 25 years to solve this problem. If we're all dealing with all these little intellectual property things where we can't send seed here, we can't send seed there, it's a huge problem. So I think we have to figure out a way to have all this material in a central database or a central seed bank and then can be replicated across the world for various types of research activities. So anyway, that's all I have to say for right now. But I think there's all this data is coming out, but can we actually have access to that, the genetic material? That's critical, and we're not. There's a lot of times when we can't get access to that. And like one of the, I'm really passionate about this right now, but this, there's all these mutant collections around the world. In Japan, in Taiwan, IRIC has this, in France, and for me to get the entire mutant collection from Yui, I can't do that. I can get 3 or 4 seed from her, and that's fine. For Hiroshika in Japan, same thing. In China, same thing. So we also need to really address that too, and have the mutant databases there, but have access to all this stuff. And hopefully this Informatics portal would promote easier access of the materials that we need for functional genomics in rice.
Yeah, I think just to comment on that, Rory Sackville-Hamilton sits here, the head of our gene bank, but this is really the last point you made about the ability to move seed around and have access to also specialized genetic stocks collections. That is quite a headache, and all of the agreements on genetic resources that have been put in place in recent years seem to have these things, slowed down these things rather than encouraged them, which was, I think, the original intention at some point. But I think we're also learning on that end, and you learn it basically by doing. What we have at IRIC, for example, just to mention that, to recognize is that I think we have to increasingly differentiate different categories of genome plasmids in the way they're being made available. So material that falls under one category, the 3D system, of course, needs to be freely moving around with the SMTA and the usual things. Other material that people have under development may have certain restrictions imposed on that, but you still can move it. And then the mutant collections, these are resources that people have invested in. And if, as you say, they would be more widely available, it would be a massive step forward. I mean, we're trying to get the mutant collection from Taiwan, for example, for the C4 rice screening project. And I think we will reach an agreement, but it requires negotiations even at a pretty high level. And in the Green Super Rice project in China, that was one of the conditions to actually get the project funded. And I think we got a special exception from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, if I'm right, something like that. So it is possible to do these things, but it usually helps if one can speak with a stronger voice, I think. I think that's the message.
So this consortium could actually do that, be a voice to promote that.
Please.
Paul Kersey, European Bioinformatics Institute. I'm actually on the advisory board for the nascent and new resource which is coming out of the Rhodopsis informatics effort. And I'd just sort of like to follow on from that comment to say the model which is being looked at is very much really one of an open consortium, where one of the main roles of the central coordinating body is to define standards, which may be technical standards, and maybe agreement on identifiers, and may be terms of use, there may be general behavioural standards, such that you become a de facto member of a consortium by operating and releasing your data according to these standards. So I think there's a sort of twofold role for the central body, and one is to provide a primary portal into the data which conforms to the agreed way of doing things, but the other is to enable the interconnectivity and the ad hoc assembly of different resources maintained in different places, and in some ways to add a sort of plasticity into your structure and your funding model, so that instead of having every resource effectively dependent, utterly dependent on a single point of integration. You have a perhaps looser network of groups with independent sources of funding whose data is all interconvertible between them. So on one hand, it's quite an ambitious model, and it will be very interesting to see how that process evolves. But on the other hand, it's really nice because it's really a very inclusive model, that if somebody produces a set of data and agrees to the standards and makes the data available from those standards, then they're de facto a member of a consortium. Now, I can see that doesn't work for seed distribution, where you have all sorts of real-world physical costs involved. But for informatics, I think it's a very attractive model to make the consortium as open and ad hoc as possible, rather than being a fixed agreement among a finite number of people. And I think I'd encourage you to think about going down as open a route as possible, at least for the informatics side of things. And I mean, you've already spoken about making the 3,000 rice genome data available under terms of a very open license, which I think is, consistent with that spirit of thinking.
Yeah, I just have one thing to address. Is basically some of the people mentioned at the beginning. Basically, this project has been initiated and finished by KS, IRIC, and BGI. And the Swiss side has no any disagreement. Basically, the base for this project is all the data should be accessible to the public, and also including the germplasm and the seeds should be accessible for the public and basically everyone. Yeah, that's
this is a pre-requirement.
Yeah, Swiss side. So it should
seeds.
be no problem. And the seeds should be available in April or.
We are in the process of increasing those genetic stocks so that we have sufficient amounts for their distribution.
Yeah, so most of them should be available pretty soon. So
starting from a single plant, though, it does require a couple of seasons of grow out before we've got stock on hand to ensure that we can conserve it long term and we have enough to distribute. So that does require some patience. The best season that we have to do so is the dry season going on now, and we have a large number of the lines planted. We also have quite a large set of the lines that are being processed now in terms of the seed that we have already multiplied.
Yeah, so at the beginning, this is the suicide agreement. Basically, suicide. We also believe this is the cornerstone for this project. All the data and all the germplasm should be available to the public.
Yeah, I don't have any question about the 3,000. I think there are just quite a few other projects that are out there that are published in Nature and Science, and you really can't get your hands on that material. So that is not quite as useful as being able to have everything available for everybody. Okay, that's my comment.
I'm Brian Scheffler with the USDA. It's probably implied, but I think it has to be clear that if you're going to go and try to get funding from governments and other agencies and stuff, you have to clearly say how you're going to utilize or go through what already exists, because they've done that. They funded things, I-Plan and various things, and so why should we give you more money if you're not utilizing that? And then the other thing is what's going to come back. So I think an effort has to be made not just to rice, but if you're grabbing stuff from the overall community, how are we going to work with the overall community and other commodities? I think that's really important, because now you're selling it beyond rice. And so they're minor things, but I think it's really important. And the last thing is translation to the field. So you're going to be generating these tools and data, and we're not talking about how the breeder's going to use that. And we have a whole breeder community across the world that are not going to be able to use these. And so in this infrastructure, whether it has to be in there with training or whatever to do that, because otherwise it's a waste of money. And that is a big issue.
Yeah, no, that I think is for us absolutely clear. And I think that's why I also made this the entry point in my presentation, because for us that is ultimately our primary goal, to really enhance the use of all of this in breeding. And it's part of the restructuring of breeding programs that need to go on worldwide towards more use of molecular breeding methods in general. But I think this is really the driving force for us too, not just for the sake of accumulating more data. That is not the point.
Yeah, it's clear it's a driving force, but I think a really strong plan has to be in place at how to do that.
Yeah, I think the point you made about on one side being able to have this accessible for people who are not experts in the field but need to use it, but on the other side also build capacity of breeders to make use of that, I think is one of the activities that such a consortium could get involved with. I agree. More, please. I'd be interested, we do have, I think, maybe a few people from the private sector here. Is anybody of you wanting to say what your perspective on that, something like this would be, or what your expectations or suggestions could be?
Do you want me to come down there, or you can all hear?
I don't know about the people who are coming in here by lap, but maybe you'll come a bit closer here.
Yeah.
If you have
I'll come down. Good morning, Richard Hodgson from Informatics. Many of you I know, many of you I've spoken with. We have had a lot of interest, and I work in international markets with Informatics, so around the world with many groups. Part of the reason of coming here and talking to you is our background is building databases for getting to genotypes and getting into application. And that stemmed out of our work with humans. And very recently, over the last couple of years, Affymetrix has gone into the agricultural sector. In bovine, we now have a number of different plant species coming out. Some of you may have gone to the presentation on wheat that was being developed in France. The rice community, and that is including many of you and many other people who aren't here, have been talking to us particularly over the last year on genotyping, getting to genotypes, and what can be done and what can be done on our technology, and where is the data that they can use, because many people don't have access to the sequence information, or they've found it difficult to have access to the sequence information. And this can be from small groups, small seed companies, to research groups, and everything along this line. So over the last 12 months, we've been talking to a number of you, as you are fully aware, of how we can link all that data together to give options for people on genotyping, on where it is. This morning I was talking to Susan Cooch, and we've talked to a number of others, in detail on what that background is to our database. So in the context of what you're talking about here, we already link with other groups in the human sector, that we link in our database of SNP information, which has come from many of the people in the community, back into the HapMap project for humans and all of the sequencing programs. We are looking at that and doing that with rice. So where there's a database of information that has, whether it's a GAP database for genotypes and phenotypes, and it has a link, we can link in a SNP information for that, which means people can then go and interrogate it. And in the confines of what you're talking about here, I'm starting to see the development of a centralised repository of information, and then questions coming into that. People may be wanting particular isolates, people may be wanting to look at particular phenotypes or traits, or people might be wanting to look for markers associated with particular traits. That last part is where we have a great deal of expertise in what's going on. And it's something that we want to find out what you as a community need and see as a value, because obviously it's clear it's of value to us of where things are going. One of the key drivers is a uniformity. Many groups want to have a core set of markers that can be applied across a number of different lines or species, and then add on to it private information. they want to, depending whether it's a company or a research group. So I just wanted to let you know that that's the situation where we are. We're talking to a number of different groups, and we're happy to participate in any of these sorts of forums to give you technical information on what we can do to see whether you can make any decisions, and that's of use to you of where things are. So we're sort of one of the background components here that can sit in and help you and give you options on things. I just wanted to let you know, so thank you very much. Unless there's any question.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Any others who want to say something?
So, back here. I'm Matt King. I'm from DuPont Pioneer. Thank you for inviting us, first of all. I guess just the thing is, you know, of course we would be happy and excited to take part in any consortium where we can collaborate on data access. Something to keep in mind, I guess, is having a centralized repository for data, I think, is also very important. It's an easy way to go and get the data. Having data easily accessible is one thing. Having it in an actionable form is something else. And so I guess that's my one suggestion to always keep in the forefront of your mind is, how are you going to make that data actionable for everybody who needs access to it? So.
I want to add up to this. One of the primary purpose of this workshop is to call for international effort for the deep analysis and to working on this sequence data and make it into a functional or more useful database that can be utilized. This is that reason we want to put this database in public domain and ask everyone who is interested to use and create whatever you want. The only thing we want also, we are drafting a white paper to have a minimum condition. That is, when you use the data for your publication for whatever purpose, you can have some feedback that can contribute to the final database we want that is useful. So that's one of the major purposes of this meeting.
But the point that you raised, the information needs to be actionable, I think that is extremely important. And I think it would also probably be a new added value that at present may not quite exist compared to the current reports that we already have. And if we can add that kind of value, I think that itself could have a huge amount of impact in terms of actually then implementing, but also having impact in terms of actual breeding. So I think that would be really, to me, a very high priority, actually, personally speaking. Yeah. Other suggestions, please?
Yeah, I had another comment, Rod Wing, again from Arizona. Picking up on what Brian said about we have to sell this properly, and you're trying to talk about getting funding to do a project like this. I mean, I think the Informatics Consortium is clearly a good start, but I think it's really kind of a beginning, because, I mean, I can imagine, I don't know if anybody saw Gary Neubauer's talk today about the barley cap, the wheat cap. This is a national breeding program, so I could envision, like, you know, India cap, China cap. There's probably already a China cap, but all these cap projects around the world where rice is extremely important, and integrating all that data into our Informatics Consortium. I mean, we definitely need to do that, and they're using regional varieties as well as a common set of germplasm across all areas and all regions. So, I mean, I think if you sold, you know, this is even a bigger type project. This would be multi-billion-dollar effort around the world, but I think we need to really think in that scale, and this informatics piece is kind of at the top, integrating all that information and having various modules, federated modules, things like that. I mean, I think we need to do that as a community. So And we need to act now to do this. And if we sold it as in a bigger framework, I think we could bring in lots of donors and lots of funding from the federal governments around the world. So, anyway.
Yeah, just as a side note, I mean, actually starting tomorrow, we have another 3-day convening here in San Diego organized by the Gates Foundation to review how we can accelerate genetic gain in breeding. So not just rice, but other crops too. And I think one of the major objectives of that one is this question, how can we really accelerate these breeding programs and taking advantage of the latest, not just breeding approach, but also the supporting technologies and all of these things. So it is kind of what we're talking about here. I think is an important piece of that then ultimately too. And as you say, I mean, one needs to think quite a bit larger when it then comes to actually really wanting to have massive. But discussion will feed into this as well. So.
Just one more perspective on that. I think the rice community is moving pretty quickly to accelerate the phenotyping and genotyping, but clearly the same thing is going on in the other major crop species. Some of the crop species are looking to groups like the rice group to see if there's a prototype that they want to follow. Others are already underway, and we should look to them and compare what they're doing and how they're going. So just to throw in the hat to the bigger picture, I would just recommend that we think about what we're doing and how it serves us. And then you've already mentioned the Arabidopsis Consortium, but there's already, there are wheat groups moving very quickly, the barley groups, the maize groups, there's some legumes. And I think that we should be very cognizant of the fact that sometimes it's actually the same funders with the same big vision, and we need global standards that are not just about rice.
Yeah, and that is actually also probably one of the topics in the convening that we're talking about starting tomorrow. It is actually also that question, where are the commonalities across different crop species in terms of how you do this and what you can learn from each other. Yeah? So I think, thanks for making this point. Yes.